Hi, folks. My name is Mike Dobbs. I'm the executive editor of Reminder Publishing, and thank you for joining us this evening. We have an important debate concerning the Democratic candidates for state Senate. And tonight, Focus Springfield is going to be presenting this debate. It is sponsored by the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, CISA, and the Springfield Food Policy Council. This debate is between the two Democratic candidates who are seeking to succeed State Senator Eric Lesser, State Rep. Jake Oliveira, and Democratic Party activist and lobbyist Sydney Levin-Epstein. Now, the winner of the primary between these two candidates will then face Granby businessman and Republican candidate William Johnson in November. So tonight's debates are going to feature many questions from the Food Bank, CISA, and the Springfield Food Policy Council. These questions will be on a variety of topics that will center on things such as food insecurity, use of land, housing, and transportation. So, in our first segment of the debate, we're going to get the questions from our sponsoring organizations. Each candidate is going to get 90 seconds to answer the debate question. And Steve Carey of Focus Springfield will ring the bell when they have 15 seconds left. Then when they are done with the time, there we go. 2 angry bells. That's what we're going to have here. So first of all, we want to get to know these candidates, and they're each going to have 2 minutes to introduce themselves to you. So in no particular order, because we'll alternate which one's going to get what questions first and second. We'll go with State Rep. Oliveira, and now you have 2 minutes to talk about yourself to the audience.
First of all, thank you, Mike, and thank you to our panelists of reporters this evening, Focus Springfield, and of course the sponsors for this evening's debate, CISA, the Western Mass Food Bank, and also the Springfield Food Policy Council. And thank you to my friend Sydney for joining me together today to talk a little bit more about our vision for the Hampden, Hampshire, and Worcester district. My name is Jake Oliveira, and I have the honor of representing the 7th Hampden district in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, which includes 4 out of the 12 unique communities in this new state Senate district. I've had the opportunity to serve as a local elected official for 16 years prior to joining the Massachusetts House, first as a representative town meeting member, and then 12 years as a member of the Ludlow School Committee, where I served as the youngest president of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees in 2016. At the same time, I worked for the Massachusetts State University System Council of Presidents, which represents our 9 Massachusetts State universities on Beacon Hill before the legislature. And early on in my career, I had the opportunity to be a legislative aide up on Beacon Hill for then State Representative Mike Rodrigues, who is now the Senate Ways and Means Chair, a very powerful committee chair in the Massachusetts State Senate. My family immigrated from Portugal and Poland in the early 20th century and settled right here in the Pioneer Valley in places like Indian Orchard, Ludlow, and in Palmer. I am a lifelong Ludlow resident, having spent my entire life there except for a brief time while I went to Framingham State, but I returned home. I've been active in my community. My family is a big part of my life. My dad is a high school math teacher, and my mom is a retired secretary. I am the only candidate running in this race that combines the experience up on Beacon Hill with the experience as a local elected official to hit the ground running for this district on day one.
Thank you very much, sir. Sydney, you have 2 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you all for tuning in this evening. Thank you to our sponsors, Laura and Emily of the Food Bank, Phil and Jacob of the Community Involved Sustaining Agriculture, Springfield Food Policy Council, and Focus Springfield, and most importantly, to Jake Oliveira for joining me tonight. I grew up behind the counter of my family's business in Route 9 in Hadley, Mass. This was a sporting goods store. Now, if you're familiar with Route 9, a lot has changed, including the development. The bison farm across the street is now a vegan cafe. The businesses around us are monopolies. They're corporations like Dick's and Walmart. Businesses like that put my family out of business. It became incredibly hard for us to afford health insurance. And as a result of financial instability, you got to figure a lot of things out, and they change. So I attended Springfield Technical Community College, where I began my academic career, and it was there where I found an understanding of how policy can change lives. While I was at Stick, I worked anywhere I could get a job. I was Tweety Bird at Six Flags, scooped ice cream at Friendly's, and babysat any family that would take me. With the support of my family, the Community Foundation scholarships, and other programs in Western Mass, and the money that I saved through this work, I was able to transfer to George Washington University. Following my graduation, I became a practitioner of political science, the degree that I earned. I served in the 114th, 115th, and 116th congressional sessions, beginning my time with Congressman Neal and then with Senator Markey. But I didn't start like that. I hustled my way through Capitol Hill using the work ethic I learned behind the counter of my family's business. I was a volunteer, then an intern, a staff assistant. By the time I left the United States Senate, I was managing a legislative portfolio of economic development, military and veterans affairs, and transportation. I am running to serve as our next state senator to help build communities where people who want to stay can stay, leveraging that experience.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we go to the questions, and because Jake went first, Sydney's going to go first with the answer to this question. And again, you have 90 seconds to answer the question. Hampden County has the largest Black and Latino populations in Western Massachusetts. In Springfield and Holyoke, they have the largest health disparities when compared to the general population of Hampden County. What are some policy solutions that you would push for to increase the ability of BIPOC individuals to live healthy lives?
In Western Massachusetts, we have an imperative to ensure that we are fighting on behalf of women, people of color, and disenfranchised communities to ensure that they have a seat at the table. The legislature recently passed and included funding for school meals for all, yet that doesn't seem like it's quite enough. This was a program that was intended to serve the communities that you're referencing. What I believe needs to happen is not a matter of whether or not this will be included in the budget, but to ensure that it's codified into law, to secure that money annually, to provide funding for school lunches, and also by providing additional resources to our farmers on the farmer-facing side. There's two fundamental components of food policy. There's the farmer side and the consumer side. Increasing access and resources to enhance their abilities to reach communities of need. And what do I mean by that? Farmers who are, excuse me for this, our farmers need to have additional resources of how to manage their budgets in order to predict how they will be spending that money. How that money is spent of producing goods determines the cost of food. If we are determining the cost of food through school meals for all, we have to be able to project that through a budget. Codifying that into law, making sure that we are not having advocates beg annually for money that should be a fundamental right for all children to access school lunches, is a right that every child in Massachusetts should have.
Thank you. Jake, same question.
Great, and thank you for that question. And it's something that's imperative to discuss because many people don't know that over 1 in 5 households with children in Massachusetts right now are food insecure. And it's far worse for our BIPOC community. Nearly 1 in 3 Black households with children are food insecure. Over 1 in 4 Latino households with children are food insecure right now. That's why it's imperative that we provide the resources to the BIPOC communities that are within Western Massachusetts that aren't just centered in places like Springfield, Holyoke, and Chicopee, but throughout Western Massachusetts, including rural poverty and rural hunger issues that impact so many people. Sydney mentioned earlier that we made in the legislature universal school lunch free for the fiscal year FY23. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of the bill along with my friend and colleague and supporter, Andy Vargas from Haverhill, to make universal school lunch permanent. But we need to go beyond that. 180 days during the year is just isn't enough to make sure that students have a quality and healthy school lunch program. That's why we've expanded and working right now and putting money into the budget this past year into the summer school lunch program, where families can go and access school lunch right at either a camp site that's within their community or at the school itself. We need to expand those programs in Massachusetts. Proud to support the budget measures that do that, and we need to make them permanent.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, and this will be for you, Jake. With a recent report indicating Western Massachusetts is 17,000 units short of what it should have for housing, what would you do to encourage the development of more housing in this senatorial district?
Thank you for the question. I think it's important to point out also the facts of being able to afford housing here in a lot of our communities in Western Massachusetts. Springfield, which is one of the most affordable communities to actually rent or buy a home, if you have the median family income here in Springfield, you need to earn 130% above the median family income to afford the median rent. That's disproportionate right now, and we need to grow our housing stock here in Western Massachusetts. I'm proud as a legislator to have voted and secured dollars, including $2 million to put in place affordable housing at the Ludlow Mills complex in the town of Ludlow, right along the Chicopee River, right over the border from Indian Orchard. The Ludlow Mills project is a great opportunity to grow and utilize some of our old and aging mill buildings and turn them into housing that can meet 21st century needs and do it in a way that it provides mixed income housing for it. The $2 million that I was able to secure in last year's ARPA budget for affordable housing for the Ludlow Mills will go a long way to put in place the process of growing our housing stock here in Western Massachusetts. But we also need to take a much more comprehensive approach and look at our suburban communities as well to ensure that they are providing affordable options and meeting their standards set forth in Mass General laws.
Thank you. Sydney, same question.
There's a housing crisis taking place across our Commonwealth, and those who are impacted in Western Massachusetts, the 17,000 units that you referenced, must be handled with the utmost urgency. I believe that it is of imperative that we increase the amount of subsidies that are provided for both for senior housing and additionally to make sure that we have mixed income housing available. I think Jake actually did a phenomenal job at representing some of the points that I would like to make as well, to continue that advocacy to expand access to multifamily housing, additional housing for our community members throughout the district, but also retrofitting our vacant mill spaces like the Ludlow Mills, like the Chicopee Mills, the South Hadley Mills, areas of which we need to revitalize. Looking at the East Springfield Mall and the Eastfield Mall, in Springfield, that could be developed into additional housing opportunities. We have the land available to do so. We have the funding at the state level to invest in these properties, to increase access to more housing and to provide opportunities here in Western Massachusetts to help connect our Commonwealth and to provide those opportunities.
Thank you. Okay, Sydney, you'll go first with this question. One of the issues facing agriculture in our region is land use. There's a lot of farmland that is being redeveloped for other uses. As you probably know, there's a generational issue here where a group of farmers retire, pass on, and not necessarily do their families take over the farm. Instead, the farm land goes for another use. So what do you see as a way or ways to preserve current farmland and grow agricultural use?
The next generation of farm owners are being forced out and priced out of the ability to maintain the land and to do the work necessary to keep their farms going. I was actually just speaking with farmers in Ludlow at Elliston Beef Farms, trying to identify the root causes that is preventing the generational exchange of farm ownership. One of which is that costs are skyrocketing. A round bale of hay, which is a necessity in order to help feed your cattle, to feed your land, to make sure that the nourishment is taking place in order to produce the quality of goods that we expect. The cost of one bale of hay has gone up over double to $15 a bale. This is not just part of inflation. This is a climate change issue. There's a climate crisis that is preventing people from being able to afford this. The cost of fertilizer has gone up. All the tools that are necessary in order to make sure that a farm can function has skyrocketed. And what happens when the cost of hay has gone up by double? Inevitably, so were all our blueberries. In 2020, we were experiencing a level 2 drought. In 2022, we had one of the wettest summers on record. And in 2023, as of just a couple of days ago, we are now in a level 3 critical drought. The crisis of climate change is impacting the crisis of the ability to afford to maintain the land in which farms are on.
Thank you very much. Jake, same question.
Thank you, Mike. I have the honor of representing several communities in my House district right now that are included in this new state Senate district, where there are many working farms and farms that are, struggling but thriving to a certain extent because of the resources that we've been providing from the Commonwealth and the federal government to help them get over the hump. I have the honor of having right now Cold Springs Orchard, which is UMass Amherst, their actual agricultural experimentation facility that actually provides resources to farmers all over the world to maximize their crop growth. The research that's done there informs farmers all across Massachusetts right now. I had the honor of hosting the Fruit Growers Association at Cold Springs Orchard just about 3 weeks ago, where fruit farmers from all over the Commonwealth came together and found ways in which they can maximize their produce, they can maximize their crops for the research that we're doing right here in our backyard by our public higher ed institutions and investing in programs that are solving worldwide hunger issues and crop shortages throughout the world. That research is done right here in the Hampden and Hampshire and Worcester district. Also looking at some of our urban farms as well as another way of promoting it. I have the honor of having in my section of Indian Orchard the Wellspring Harvest Hydroponic Lettuce Facility, the largest urban greenhouse in all of Massachusetts. And I was proud to work with my colleague and friend Orlando Ramos to secure greater funding so communities like Springfield have access to farms just like some of our rural communities.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jake, you're going to have the first attempt at this next question. Lack of public transportation is tied to a number of issues, from employment opportunities to food insecurity. How would you help the regional transit authorities receive the funding that they need to expand?
Thank you, Mike. I'm proud to be a member of the Regional Transportation Caucus in the legislature that's basically made up of a lot of legislators that are outside of the MBTA service area. So in our region here in Western Massachusetts, the PVTA, which is used quite frequently as a mode to get around our communities. We have right here in the city of Springfield urban food deserts where people don't have access to the food quality that they deserve through a lot of things that we have access to in the suburbs or in rural communities here in Western Massachusetts. Making sure that before we invest a cent in the MBTA to make it free, we make sure that we provide transportation investments here in the PVTA here in Western Massachusetts in providing free ride services. They've experimented with the Worcester Regional Transit Authority and that. It seemed to work. We should be doing the same here in Western Massachusetts. Part of the Regional Transportation Caucus in the legislature, we fought very hard and pushed back against Charlie Baker and his consistent cuts year after year to regional transportation systems. Every dollar that we invest in regional transportation goes back in to help the communities that need it the most. Expanding those lines to make sure that they reach quality food centers is essential to making sure that our urban areas and our rural areas have access to quality food, and that's reliant upon a reasonable and well-regulated, well-funded regional transportation system.
Sydney?
Throughout the campaign trail, I've talked about leading with empathy. What that means is listening to concerns and writing legislation and advocating on policies that impact communities the most. Regional transit authorities are impacted by the cost of gas. Having a gas tax that impacts a regional transit authority's ability to afford that funding, to use that funding well enough to allocate it to get from place to place. In Western Massachusetts, right, we don't have West-East Rail yet. We are not an intercity passenger rail city, or community, rather. I would use my voice as a state senator to ensure that we are actually advocating on policies that make the most sense for our communities, opposing a gas tax that hurts areas like ours that not just have urban food deserts, but transit deserts. And we need to prioritize the needs of transit authorities that actually make sense for our region and a way to have intercity and intercommunity connection. Also making sure that that funding is helping to support our seniors, that we are increasing the amount of rails and paths and the commuting lines available to them to get where they need to go for any activity.
Thanks very much. Okay, this is a very broad question, but it's a vital question, as certainly we see what's happening in the country right now. Climate change is affecting everything, but it will definitely be seen in food production. What more can the Commonwealth do to address climate change locally in Massachusetts? And Sydney, you will get that question first.
Well, thank you. I touched upon this a little bit, but when I think about the ways in which food policy can make most sense on the realest of levels, there's two ways to do that. One is to ensure that farmers have the access that they need to financial resources. How is it possible to anticipate what your budget and your overall cost will be as a farm owner if you don't know what the climate will be, right? Last summer alone, as I mentioned, it was the wettest summer on record, and now we are in a level 3 critical drought. Our state has to do everything in its capacity to ensure that there is the financial resources, the laws and available resources, in order to make sure they know how to navigate that process year to year. And on the consumer-facing side, we need to ensure that our food banks and distribution centers are consistently funded well enough to help access our most disenfranchised communities.
Thank you very much. Jake, what's your answer?
Climate change is our greatest existential threat as a society and as a world right now. I'm pretty proud that in the legislature we've taken steps to put Massachusetts on a path to get to net zero by 2050 right now and reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. The votes that we took in the legislature first last year to develop the roadmap, and then the climate bill that we passed just a couple of weeks ago in the legislature does a few things. Number one, it invests in renewable energy. It invests in things like wind and solar and areas that we should be investing in, and divests in things that are actually causing a lot of our greenhouse gas emissions, things like wood-burning biomass, which we fought successfully over a decade to prevent from coming here in the city of Springfield. We got that language into the bill that passed both chambers of the legislature, even as the governor objected to it. But there are many things that impact our food system that are reliant upon climate change. When you look at 90 miles from here and we look at the coastline of Massachusetts right now, we see lobster fishermen going out of business because lobsters are moving north because the waters are warming as to a great extent. The crops that we grow here in western New England, including things that we take for granted, certain crops that can't grow anywhere else, are being impacted by this threat. That is why we need to be a leader on climate change here in Massachusetts to ensure that our farmers, our residents, and we do our part as worldwide citizens to ensure we reduce our dependency on fossil fuels.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jake, you're going to have this question first. Throughout the Commonwealth, there are food deserts in which residents must travel considerable distance to a grocery store. I live a mile and a half from this studio. The closest grocery store, full-service grocery store, is across the river in West Springfield. So residents in my neighborhood, for instance, they have to travel in order to get to a standard grocery store. And in fact, there has been a study that indicates we have 30% fewer grocery stores in Massachusetts than we should to adequately serve the residents. So are there ways for the Commonwealth to work with private businesses to encourage more grocery stores in areas that do not have any? And again, that's your question, Jake, to begin with.
Thank you, Mike. And I'd actually take it a step further as well. There are things that we've done in the legislature to try to address the issue of urban food deserts that exist, and I would also say rural food deserts that exist in Massachusetts right now in some of the far reaches of the Commonwealth. Included within this district is the community of Warren, which I would consider also a food desert without access to the grocery stores that some of us that live in suburban communities enjoy and take for granted sometimes. One of the things that we were proud to do in the legislature was actually increase the Healthy Incentives Program, which increases funding that offers individuals and families with SNAP benefits a rebate on purchases of fruits and vegetables at farmers markets. We're seeing many more farmers markets coming into urban areas right now that are providing nutritious food instead of, those small bodegas or convenience stores that have high fat content, high sodium content that is terrible right now. So here in Massachusetts, we've made a conscious effort as legislators to invest in the things to get healthy fruits and vegetables into our urban areas and provide access. But that's also tied back to transportation as well and ensuring that we have reliable transportation to grocery stores. We also put in a lot of funds for the Child Nutrition Outreach Program, but working with businesses to ensure that these areas have the capacity and showing that people can use those benefits that can invest in a company or a grocery store that's moving in will go a long way to ending these food deserts that are plaguing the city of Springfield, the city of Chicopee, and our rural areas.
Thank you very much. Sydney?
The issue of hunger is a community health issue, one in which that it impacts our economy. If your stomach is empty, how can you contribute to work productively? Expanding access to food and to grocery stores and to farmers market is a critical component of how we keep our economy functioning, how we keep our community strong, but also healthy. It isn't just a matter of making sure that farmers markets are readily available. I also believe that we need to codify the Healthy Incentives Program, also known as HIP, whose sole program, and this began in 2017, so it's relatively new, which allows SNAP recipients to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables directly from farmers. And since their launch, SNAP families have purchased more than $22 million worth of fresh, healthy, and local foods. Rather than this being introduced by law and into the budget every year, it needs to just be codified into law to ensure that this access is readily available to those who are living in these food deserts, who are most disenfranchised and don't even have the money in which to access this food to begin with. And it's expanding that access in all corners of this district. The 12 communities that we have here in the new Hampden, Hampshire, and Worcester seat are vast. It's a microcosm of Massachusetts. It's an urban, suburban, and rural district in which the issues might be vast, but the values remain the same, which is increasing equitable access to end hunger that's drastically facing our communities.
Thank you. Okay, so this is going to be the final question from our sponsors. And I want to thank them for really good questions. We had a lot of questions to consider, and all of them have been very vital and also holistic. As you can see, the answers that the two candidates are giving fit together from topic to topic. So Sydney, according to the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative, at least 40% of the food in the United States is wasted. Now, this not only contributes to hunger, but it also contributes to greenhouse gas emission about how that food, by the way, is disposed of. So what strategies would you support to reduce food waste in Massachusetts?
The utmost imperative of any elected official is to ensure that we are listening to those who are responsible for allocating this work. Our farmers play a critical role in helping to advance the renewable aspect of reusing and getting rid of our food waste. I believe that a lot of the work that's already happening in Western Massachusetts, especially looking to farms in Belchertown and Ludlow that I've been speaking regularly with, are helping to reduce food waste in general, and it's giving the funding necessary to help make that happen.
Thank you. Jake?
Right. I'm proud to be a member of the Food Systems Caucus in the legislature, which, after the Democratic caucus, is the largest caucus. It's a bipartisan caucus. We've focused in on trying to solve a lot of the issues that we've been chatting about tonight. But one thing that I've noticed in working with a lot of our food pantries, including the Western Mass Food Bank, is that a lot of our businesses, including businesses like Ludlow Central Bakery in Ludlow, donate a lot of their extra food to a lot of the food pantries that are in the area. We have a great relationship with the Indian Orchard Food Pantry, with a lot of businesses that contribute those extra items that they have back to them. We need to encourage that more. I actually worked with Rachel's Table and my colleagues, Senator Lesser and Representative Brian Ash from Long Meadow, to ensure that Rachel's Table got some resources from the state in last year's budget, so they can actually go out to these various different producers of food and actually take some of the stuff that's extra that might be going a little bit past or near its expiration date, so we can repurpose it and not waste so much food that is in our system. We also look to our community partners in the public school side. You know, right here in the city of Springfield, you know, Sodexo has been partnering with folks within the community to ensure that we reduce the waste that's happening within our public school system of students throwing things away. A lot of times they throw it away because they don't like what's being served in there. When we can provide healthier options to students and more diversity of what they're eating, then students are most likely to eat it, and we aren't wasting as much. Encouraging those policies are imperative.
And thank you very much. So now we're going to come to the portion of the evening where my three colleagues from WAMC, from Western Mass Politics and Insight, and New England Public Media are going to ask questions. Each of them are going to ask 2 questions. And we're going to have Adam Frenier of New England Public Media ask his 2 questions first. Adam?
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to continue on with the theme of food insecurity and agriculture. And this question will go to you first, Jake. In your previous experiences, whether it's public or personal, what are some things you've done to help work with agriculture, help to try to improve local farms, and to help combat food insecurity?
Well, first of all, thank you, Adam, and it's nice to see Paul Tuthill and both NPR news stations out here today partnering up for it. When I'm looking at what we do to encourage agriculture locally, is supporting our family farms that still exist. You know, I have Belchertown and Ludlow in my district, and I always say both communities are where rural Massachusetts meets suburban Massachusetts. There are several farms that are located within these communities that I support on a regular basis. I have, for example, a beef farm, Austin Brothers Valley Farm, which is located in Belchertown, that has a constant presence, and I'll give a plug for them at the farmers market every Sunday this summer. They are an excellent example of how they can partner to maximize technology in order to help out with their production. Right here in Western Massachusetts, Congressman McGovern has been leading the way with a lot of our dairy farmers. And I will say with dairy farmers, not many people know this, but it's one of the highest suicide rates out of any profession right now because it's a very difficult lifestyle. And so technology is now being incorporated into a lot of our family farms with the help of the federal government, with the help of grants from the state government, to maximize the potential of a lot of our agricultural land and invest in it right now. I'm proud to be someone who worked very closely with the dairy farmers of Massachusetts when I was a school committee member to promote the dairy industry here in Massachusetts, but also as a legislator supporting those farms, advertising them, and getting the word out there that there are affordable options where you can grow and actually access healthy food within our community. It's part of your bully pulpit as a legislator.
Sydney, your turn.
I have on-the-ground experience of working with farmers every season to ensure that I'm learning as much as I can about what the role of actually farming in Western Mass means. Our small parcel and large parcel farms that we are seeing have the heaviest burden regarding the expenses that were paid. These aren't just farmers in our community. These are my friends. These are my family. These are people who are doing this on a regular basis. You know, only 2 times a year can you bale hay. How many state senators can say that they bale hay twice a year? And not just our large round ones. For anyone who's baled square bales, which is a full physical activity, right? You can understand the visual components right in your hands of the impacts of climate change. The density of that bale, if it is moist, if it is too fried, you can tell what the cost of hay will be that year. So when we talk about the experience of how to advocate on behalf of our farmers, how to make sure that that experience of the food deserts that are contributing, we have to look at the source. We have to identify how climate change, the climate crisis, the rate of inflation, the lack of funding that these small business owners have yet to receive stabilizes an economy that impacts the price of blueberries.
Thank you, Sydney. We're going to switch gears now and talk about taxes for a moment. Massachusetts, of course, is running a projected massive budget surplus, so much so that a rather arcane law is maybe about to kick in that would provide rebates to taxpayers. Now, is there a better way to do that besides just following what this law has to say? Or should we just let that take place for the first time since 1986? Sydney, go right ahead.
Are you asking if we should take the rebate in place?
Should we take the rebate that's in place, or is there a better way to do it?
I think that there are better ways to do it by supporting the Fair Share Amendment and to ensure that we are getting our fair share of funding distributed, that equitable wealth distribution is taking place across Massachusetts.
Jake?
I would agree with that. Looking at right now the tax code that we have in Massachusetts, you know, we voted in the legislature to actually do it in a much more equitable way to utilize our extra resources here in Massachusetts. So millionaires aren't getting a tax break and a simple check in the mail that's coming on out there. We should be doing it and targeting those tax relief areas so it's hitting the people the most that are being impacted by the rate of inflation. So for example, what we included in the economic development bill that I was proud to vote for included expanding the senior circuit breaker tax credit, which is essential right now for helping seniors stay in their homes when property tax rates are rising. Expanding the earned income tax credit, which actually targets towards working families and people that are just struggling to get by. Expanding the dependency tax credit as well, basically doubling it is something that we proposed within the tax package. So I think we should be going back to the drawing boards right now, eliminating eliminating these disparities that might exist that are actually giving, far share of that income back to people who don't need it, and really targeting it to the families that do right now. I also support the Fair Share Amendment by actually eliminating some of the income inequality that exists here in Massachusetts right now, and utilizing some of those funds to strategically invest in areas that have been neglected for far too long.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Adam. Up next is Matt Safransky from Western Mass Politics and Insight.
Good evening, candidates. First question I wanted to pose is why this office? I mean, both of you have had careers in public service. Why do you feel that you can have the largest impact by becoming a state senator as opposed to pursuing what you've been doing before, whether that was holding elective office before or working in a government setting previously, as Sydney has? So I'll start that off with Jake.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks for joining us at the podium, at the rostrum up here. If you asked me a year ago whether or not I'd be running for the state Senate, I would have said you were out of your mind. I got the dream job that I wanted for a lifetime as serving as a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, representing 4 wonderfully dynamic communities here in Western Massachusetts. But when the opportunity of Senator Lesser, who is running for a different office, came up just about 6 or 7 months ago now, I know that the relationships that I've built on the Senate side, having worked for the chairperson of the Ways and Means Committee, the person with a lot of the things that we've discussed tonight has a lot of say on the budget-making process for the Commonwealth, having worked for that person in the legislature over a decade ago, and the relationships that I've built with senators over the last 2 decades, first with my advocacy work, working as a school committee member, advocating up on Beacon Hill, working in the building, the relationships that you build on Beacon Hill are so critical to providing resources to our region of the Commonwealth. And so I could have ran for re-election to the House, probably would have been very successful, and probably would have been very happy there. But I know I can do more for our region as a member of the state Senate, given the relationships I've built there, given that we have a historic opportunity to invest in Western Massachusetts with resources coming in from the federal government and locally. I know I can do more than any other candidate to bring those resources back to Western Massachusetts as a senator.
Sydney?
I decided to run for state Senate to solve this very serious problem which is taking place in Western Mass, that people are leaving. Our seniors cannot afford to stay here, and the next generation of people are flocking to other cities for better jobs. With my federal and state legislative experience, I am confident that I can secure the fair share of funding necessary to build West-East Rail, to create better jobs in the life sciences, to continue to fight for reproductive justice and combat climate change. The work that I have done for Senator Markey and Congressman Neal have all stemmed from a lesson I learned while serving Shimon Peres, the former Prime Minister of Israel, prior to his passing, which stems in the ability that you must believe in yourself in order to believe in your community. I am confident and certain that I can secure what is necessary to take the torch from State Senator Eric Lesser, our likely next Lieutenant Governor, to ensure that we are securing the fair share of funding necessary to fight for the future of Western Mass, and what it means to be proud to have the audacity to believe in the future of our economy, the way it can stabilize and thrive here.
Thank you. Next question. You both have discussed this in prior debates, appearances in public settings. Reproductive issues are, of course, top of many people's minds with the recent Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe versus Wade. Both of you have discussed it. I know Representative Oliveira has discussed bills the legislature has passed this effect, and Sydney has discussed pregnancy crisis centers. So I do want to ask, what more can be done specifically with the area of pregnancy crisis centers, considering that the Supreme Court has been quite protective of them, has struck down laws attempting to regulate them? So what can the legislature do to ensure that not just the reproductive services are available, but that they're not misleading and that they are actually providing proper information to women?
I want to explain what a pregnancy care center is, because it's a common term that is regularly misunderstood. A pregnancy care center is a location where you believe you will be seeking reproductive health services, and that is an all-encompassing services. Attorney General Maura Healey, United States Senator Elizabeth Warren have both issued consumer protection warnings on centers like this, because as someone looking to go seek reproductive care, you are assuming you will get a full comprehension of what your options are. Even if you will have access contraception, if you would like to seek an abortion pill, if you'd like to seek a medical abortion, those options should all be made available to you. The reason why the far-right Supreme Court has protected these entities is because they are classified as nonprofits, protected under the First Amendment, and ability to operate and to give religious views. The problem is the misleading information. Having had personal experience going to centers like this where you can be misguided, not given the option and opportunity to understand what's fully available to you, is a fundamental flaw in the ability in which we are regulating women's health centers across Massachusetts and in Western Massachusetts. We have clinic deserts, just like how we've been talking about food deserts. This is a very serious crisis. One of the ways that we can combat this is by supporting city councils, ensuring that there are financial penalties and ordinances given when every time someone is deceived out of seeking care that they have a right to know exists. We can introduce state legislation to help combat this and help make sure those financial penalties are instituted.
Thank you. Jake?
Thank you. First of all, reproductive rights are human rights. I am the only candidate that's actually taken a vote to expand abortion care here in Massachusetts, as well as gender-affirming care. When the Roe decision came out just a few months ago, I think all of us felt that pit in our stomach there of just the heartache that so many women and girls will face and the disrespect that they've been shown by 3 justices of the Supreme Court that Donald Trump put on there to reverse the Roe decision. It came back to the state legislators here, and so we took steps and worked very quickly to ensure that a woman's right to choose here in Massachusetts is protected, but also that people that coming from other states are protected as well from any type of persecution. These pregnancy crisis or care centers that are out there are false information centers. They are feeding people misinformation, and they need to be closed. What we can do as state legislators is remove their nonprofit status so they can't hide under the First Amendment of the Constitution. That is ridiculous that they would be out there spreading misinformation right now. They need their nonprofit status revoked. We need to file legislation working under the Constitution. I've had conversations with the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House to ensure that we close down these crisis centers, to ensure that women and girls aren't getting false information fed to them by these centers.
Thank you very much, candidates.
Thank you, Matt. Next up is Paul Tuthill of WAMC Radio.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening to both of you. Just about every candidate who runs for a state office from Western Massachusetts talks about regional equity. I'd like you to tell me, what does regional equity mean to you, and what would you do if you're a state senator to attain it? And I forget who goes first. Sydney.
Ensuring regional equity means that you are also building an opportunity and building a platform that is impossible to ignore. We've seen this done really well with State Senator Eric Lesser's leadership. The amount of money that he has been able to secure for this district to allocate for different programs ranging from nonprofits to institutions to public education is far beyond what we've seen before. Helping to create regional equity means that we are leveraging relationships both at the federal and state level to allocate tax money and surplus that is securing back to Western Mass. It means realizing the dream of West-East Rail isn't a dream at all, but something that we can actually take. Helping to increase a biotechnology tax incentive to create more jobs in Western Massachusetts to give people the option to stay. And ensuring that pregnancy care centers are, if not banned, but have a severe financial penalty through the Attorney General's office to help make sure that real women's health centers in Western Massachusetts are operating in the fullest of funding. That is what it means to make sure that regional equity is allocated, is that we are focusing on the issues that most deeply impact Western Mass, those that are regularly forgotten by insiders on Beacon Hill, and leveraging the power of a voice, one that is impossible to ignore. And that's what makes my candidacy so unique, is that though I would be the youngest woman to ever serve in the state Senate, I would not be the youngest person. For Senator Riley served when he was 24. Senator Eric Lesser entered the legislature when he was 27. This has happened before, but yet a woman's experience is regularly questioned. I will enter that state Senate with the ability to help gather the information and gather the attention to ensure that those relationships I already have are helping to produce in Western Mass.
Thank you. Jake?
Regional equity means for me is what we've tried to do, but we have the opportunity right now to actually come to fruition. I see 4 areas of regional equity where we can invest right now, which we have been sorely lacking for so long. First of all, education equity. When we look at education here in Western Massachusetts, I was proud to support, pass, and fight for the amendment that actually changed the Chapter 70 funding formula here, so the city of Springfield, the city of Chicopee, and the city of Holyoke got the actual dollars necessary to provide a quality education to every student, no matter which zip code that you live in. But it's also about education equity when it comes to public higher education. Massachusetts ranks 48th out of 50 states in per capita spending for public higher education. It's not just good for the future of Massachusetts, for those attending our community colleges, our state universities, and UMass, but it's good economically for our region. You know, the largest employer, when you add up the 4 counties of Western Massachusetts, is higher education and public higher education. Providing more resources to that source of funding here in Western Massachusetts will grow our economy. Looking at transportation, when we talk about regional equity, yes, West-East Rail, we're right on the cusp of making that a reality. I meet weekly with members of the legislative delegation and a small task force to ensure we get that over the finish line. Economic equity is another thing, good paying jobs, and lastly, infrastructure. Infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, but our water and sewer systems, which are over 100 years old and are failing, need to be fixed.
All right, thank you. Various good government groups and watchdogs give Massachusetts state government very low marks, rock bottom marks, in fact, when it comes to transparency. Back on August 1st, we saw the state legislature taking votes on major bills at 2 o'clock in the morning after the legislation had been negotiated in secret by a handful of legislators. What would you do as state senators to make the people's business more accessible to the people? Jake?
Number one, I think a reliable calendar. As one of those legislators that actually was up all night long on Sunday into Monday and waited until 10:15 in the morning to take our last vote as a legislative session, turning back the clock is not something that we should be doing. We need to have a reliable calendar where we can actually schedule out where we're meeting as a legislator. I wait every Friday evening to find out when the legislature will be in session for that next week. We need a reliable calendar in the legislature right now, and this isn't just a House issue, this is a Senate issue as well, and it's a systemic issue for our legislature to actually tackle. If you have a reliable calendar, you can map out the bills that you'll be taking up and the timelines and triggers that you will hit for it. Will it solve all the issues of those midnight or 3 a.m. sessions where legislators are coming down to the wire, where we're negotiating deals, many of which did very good things for bills that we were working on, but a reliable calendar can set that up early. We also should be naming the chairs of committees well before March so they can begin their work. There are 7,000 bills that are filed in the Massachusetts legislature each session. Those bills all get a public hearing before one of the standing committees of the legislature. The committees themselves need to have a calendar so we can space it out, so we're not coming up against the wire on July 31st of the end of a 2-year session, so we can actually get to the people's business. And that's what I plan to do and plan to advocate for as a state senator.
Thank you. Sydney?
One of the ways to increase transparency is also to acknowledge what the role of the legislature is. Because of the inability for our current elected officials to have any sense of time management, they lost their ability to override any veto that could come from Charlie Baker's office. Our current state representatives have decided to forego working in the month of August because, as Representative Ron Mariano was quoted in the Boston Globe last night, they have campaigns to run. They have to go on vacation. And it's a matter of time management, something that I am quite proud of my ability to do. It's making sure that legislation is introduced in a proper manner. It's actually doing the job of being mindful, okay, well, if I would like this to go into a budget that's going to be on Governor Baker's desk, I've got to work with my colleagues to make sure that we are negotiating this well, that we aren't wasting time and airtime just speaking into a microphone on the Senate floor. This is something that Senator Lesser has championed, and it's something that I've learned from him. It's also something that I've learned from Ed Markey himself, of the ability to manage your time in the legislature to do the job well enough to make sure that you are being effective. It is an embarrassment for every taxpayer in Massachusetts that any any legislator even had to stay up through the middle of the night because they couldn't get their job done.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Paul. Okay, so at this part of the debate, we're going to do the Lincoln Douglas format for a couple of questions. And so the way it's going to run is Sydney will ask a question of Jake. Jake will answer the question. Sydney will have a 30-second rejoinder if she wishes to. Same thing for Jake. He'll ask Sydney a question. She'll have the answer. Then he will have the 30-second rejoinder if he elects to. If you don't elect to, that's fine too. So I have no idea what you're going to ask each other, and actually I'm all a Twitter about it. So I'm trying to keep in order who had the last question, so who keeps the first question. I think it was Jake. So Jake, what question would you like to ask Sydney?
Well, thank you. And this is kind of the most fun part of the debate because we actually get an exchange at this point instead of simply answering questions. Probably one of the most important roles that we have as state legislators is to cast votes on behalf of our constituents. And casting a vote is an essential part of being a citizen. You know, casting votes is something that I take very seriously. I think Barack Obama said it, the most important role in government is not the role of state senator or president or U.S. senator, it's the role of citizen. And us as citizens have a responsibility to participate in the political process. It's why our constituents serve us. So since becoming eligible to vote, Sydney, you've missed 80% of elections in Massachusetts. You've never voted in a local election until you started running for this office. You missed several other elections and never took yourself off the voter rolls here in Massachusetts. So my question is, why should we bother voting for you if you haven't and don't bother to vote with us?
I have spent years of my career working to elect progressive champions across this country, from Georgia to Massachusetts, helping to ensure that our rights in Washington, D.C., where I have lived for the past 7 years, is making represented on Capitol Hill. This is a very similar attack that was used against Senator Lesser regarding residency, and I am quite proud of the roles that I've played to help elect Senator John Ossoff, Senator Reverend Warnock, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Senator Ed Markey serving in those offices in Washington.
Okay, Jake, 30-second rejoinder if you want.
Eric Lesser, our current senator, also had Washington service. He worked in the Obama White House. He still managed to vote locally in Longmeadow. He's managed to vote in general elections. He managed to vote locally for important projects that I fought for my entire life to do locally, whether it's sitting on a school committee or on a select board or important projects like the adult center in the town of Longmeadow. Those are all votes locally, and when you miss them, you're not showing the same respect of that citizenship that we all enjoy and fought to protect.
Okay, Sydney, this is your turn to ask Jake a question.
I've regularly heard you refer to that you have 20 years of public service. I'm curious to know why you are counting your high school experience as part of that experience.
So right now, if you want to add it up, we can do the math. My dad's a high school math teacher. I spent 16 years in local government, 4 as a rep town meeting member, which is the legislative elective branch within our community, 12 years as a school committee member, that's 16, plus the 2 that I spent almost now 2 years as a state legislator. If you look at the service that I had in high school, I was already advocating and speaking on town meeting floors, similar to what Senator Lesser did, to fight for education resources. I spent 2 years as a student rep to the school committee, and one of the only student reps here in Massachusetts who actually would talk about issues before their town. That service of elective service, even while you're in high school, is important because you have an impact on your community. So that 20 years of service, I'm very proud of, even when it was in high school, but also in college. I was appointed to the Board of Trustees of Framingham State for 3 years by Governor Deval Patrick and Mitt Romney at the time. I also served at the same time on the state's Board of Higher Education. That's all service to our community. That's all service to our state. And I've spent my entire life dedicated to providing and giving a voice to Western Massachusetts, no matter which role I served in, whether it was elected, appointed, or elected by my peers.
Rejoinder, Cindy?
I guess we just have a very different definition of what it means to either be a public servant or a career politician. Making a career of profiting off of taxpayers, putting your ego on the ballot again and again is not something that I would refer to as over 20 years of experience. For when we are 16, there is something quite beneficial of just participating in our community's involvement.
Okay, so now, Jake, you can ask another question of Sydney.
I'd be happy to. On your website, you claim to be leading the charge on climate change policy with tangible policy goals and support farms to protect our environment, yet none of those proposals are listed on your website or shared with local media. So tell me, what are your specific climate proposals and how will you file them and what will you file in the state Senate?
So what I'm most curious about is, having known that you've made fake accounts to follow my profiles, I'm a bit shocked that you also haven't looked at the website, which does list climate change policies. There is an issues tab that has been released to the media in order to provide all full access. So I have truly no idea where you fabricated this, but that information is quite available.
Fake profiles, I find that, number one, insulting, Sydney. I have never created a fake profile to try to follow somebody on a campaign. That is insulting to even mention that to me, and I wish you would kind of take that back because I haven't done that.
Okay, so Sydney, you ask a question of Jake now.
I would really like to know, and this is a personal question. This past Friday night, which in the Jewish community that I live in is Shabbat, it's a heavily Jewish neighborhood. Having known that there have been so many different things going on in my own life, your team knocked on my family's door, not just on Shabbat, while my mother was in the hospital, continuing to antagonize us. And the ways in which some of your campaign staff have continued to antagonize me personally, this isn't a question other than I'm just asking for an apology of why this continues to happen, because it's completely inappropriate and helps to disengage people from getting involved. My neighborhood was alarmed by what was taking place. I was even shocked by it too when I ran into you knocking doors. It was completely inappropriate to do that to my own family, and honestly, I'm just asking for an apology.
I'm actually insulted by even that question. You were out knocking on doors that same evening in your neighborhood right now. I find it kind of interesting that you're spending time in your own neighborhood. You should be spending time in other parts of the district right now. My team was actually out there. I was out there knocking on doors, as I'm out on every day of the years for the last 6 months. I've knocked on I think 13 or 14,000 doors right now. It was on the list. I knock on doors. That's what we do in campaigns. I got a call that evening, actually, from someone living in the city of Springfield who actually, because I put my cell phone number on all my palm cards and all my literature and encouraged people to ask, I got a call that evening saying that your campaign team was pulling my palm cards out and putting yours in its place. That's a dirty tactic to play in campaigns right now, particularly for the fact that everybody has cameras right now. Why would you even do that? So I'd actually like an apology on my end for taking my campaign literature. I received those calls right on Friday night from your campaign team. I was also, when I was out in the neighborhood in Long Meadow, and I didn't know it was your neighborhood, I had no clue it was your neighborhood. You were out there, and I had somebody with your bumper sticker following me around. That actually, was kind of unsettling to me. Part of this campaign is actually about getting out and meeting voters, and that's what you do.
Well,
Okay, you have 30 seconds.
While I appreciate you mansplaining how to run a field program, and if literature was taken, I do apologize for that. Though I do notice you haven't apologized for attacking and antagonizing my own family, which I thought was completely inappropriate. I do apologize if that happened. And I don't know what more you need from me other than that, because here's the thing, and up until this past week when I saw that happen, I had been incredibly proud of the clean campaigns that we had both been running. I haven't spent $1 or even a cent going negative in this race, and I just hope that in order to encourage civic engagement, we can continue to keep this as civil as possible.
Okay. We now have come to pretty much the conclusion of this program, and so each candidate is going to be able to do a closing statement for 90 seconds. Jake, I believe you should be going first, so I'll give that 90 seconds to you first.
Thank you. And first of all, let me thank all the sponsors of this debate this evening, whether it was the questions about food insecurity here in Western Massachusetts. I'm proud of my record of service to my community here in Western Massachusetts, whether it was locally as a town meeting member, a school committee member, an advocate up on Beacon Hill. I've spent my life advocating for Western Massachusetts. You know, even in college, and this is kind of trivial to say, my friends nicknamed me Ludlow because I talked about Western Mass so much. And it's kind of trivial to say, but it's part of who I am. Every office that I've ever been in is to actually fight for Western Massachusetts, to fight for equitable education funding, to fight for equitable transportation funding. I am the only candidate running in this race who has the experience at the State House, who has the experience as a local elected official, who has the experience as a sitting legislator to hit the ground running for our district on day one. There are 12 unique communities in this state Senate district right now, 10 in full, 2 in part. I am the only candidate that has actually represented some of these communities, 4 of them that represent the diversity of this district. Places like Springfield and Chicopee and Ludlow and Belchertown that really gets to the heart of the suburban, rural, and urban nature of this district. I know I can do more for this region than any other person running in this race to be your advocate on Beacon Hill.
Thank you very much. Sydney?
I decided to run for this seat because I have the audacity to believe in the future of Western Massachusetts. I have served my community in 3 congressional sessions. I have worked to elect progressives across this country. I have served in the office of Shimon Peres, the former Prime Minister and President of Israel. My background is in service and fighting for those who haven't had a chance to be heard. I know what I am capable of, and I know that I'm ready to use my federal and state legislative experience, the relationships necessary in order to secure our fair share of funding to serve the community that raised me. As our next state senator, I will fight like hell to ensure that we are protecting our community, that we are creating better jobs, building West East Rail, combating climate change, and enshrining reproductive justice into our state's constitution. I would like to thank everyone for participating today and to joining us. I'd also like to thank Jake and our sponsors and you all as well for tuning in, because what makes democracy so special is its civic engagement, is our ability to have conversations and in the exchange of ideas. What we're seeing today in a Democratic primary is fantastic for our community. The ability to get out the vote and to engage on that primary ballot is something that is a privilege. It is not a privilege, it is a right, and in order to participate in that. So I thank you all again for joining us, for your time, and for the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the 2 candidates for participating in this debate. What we've seen tonight is democracy in action. This is what it's all about. We have 2 people, both of whom with great experience, both of whom have point of views, and they're asking for you to consider to vote for one of them in the upcoming primary. I also want to thank our sponsors tonight, the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, CISA, and Springfield Food Policy Council. The fact that they were spearheading the effort for this debate shows that there's all sorts of community organizations that are very concerned about the future of Western Massachusetts, and they want voters to hear from the candidates directly, and they should be congratulated for that. I'd like to thank my 3 colleagues. I probably owe them a drink at this point. I probably owe these 2 a drink at this point.
I'll take you up on that.
There we go. But I want to also thank everyone who's watching Focus Springfield this evening. You've taken some time away from your usual television to watch people talk about issues in order for you to help determine what you would like to do on Election Day. And by the way, if you've been impressed by these 2 candidates, please understand that this program is going to be available on the Focus Springfield website. It's going to be also given to other community access stations within the district. So if your friends missed it, there's a way for them to see it. All they have to do is to go to the Focus Springfield website. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, folks. My name again is Mike Dobbs from Reminder Publishing, and thanks for watching Focus Springfield.